Welcome to the LIFFFT series on customer development. Today we're going to be talking about customer interviews, or specifically how to do a good customer interview and the rules around that. So customer development is all about validating your assumptions around your business. And the way you do that is by talking to your customers. There's a couple simple rules that we have that will help you make sure that you're getting good information from them. The first one, and the most important, is no pitching. The difference between sales and customer development is subtle, but basically at the end, you're not asking them for money. And so if they think that you're going to be asking them for money, they're not going to be giving you the information that you want. They're not going to open up to you. So if I say, hey, I'm building this dog shampoo that makes dogs not smell bad, would you want that? That sounds like you're selling to them. So they might say no, or they might say yes, but either way, they're probably just saying yes because they want to be nice to you. They may not actually need it. You haven't demonstrated anything. You haven't validated any of your assumptions. So no pitching while you're doing customer development during your customer interviews. The next rule is no ice cream questions. A great example of an ice cream question is, do you want ice cream? No rational human being would ever say no to that question. Everyone wants ice cream all of the time. So by asking, do you want ice cream, you're not getting anything useful out of them. So back to the dog example, does your dog smell bad sometimes? Yeah, it does. Wouldn't it be great if your dog didn't smell bad sometimes? Yes. What rational person would want their dog to smell bad? So you're not learning anything from that. So why bother asking? Because it ends up making you feel like you've validated one of your assumptions when you really haven't. The next one is pull, don't push. So you want to pull information out of them. You don't want to push things onto them. So I might ask someone, do you have a dog? Yes. Cool. What do you dislike about having a dog? And they're like, oh, well, my dog isn't particularly well trained, so it misbehaves a lot. You're like, oh, interesting. And you dive into that a little bit. But you really want to see if they want this shampoo because the dog smells bad. So you're like, well, what else don't you like about having a dog? And they're like, oh, it really messes with my social life. Like I have to come back every day after work and walk it and take it to the bathroom and clean up after it. And it's really obnoxious because I can't go out to the bar with my friends after work. And you're like, oh, interesting. Tell me about that, blah, 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 blah. And then you're like, well, what else don't you like about having a dog? And they're like, well, it sheds all the time, and I just have dog fur all over my house. And you're like, oh, interesting. They've gone through 3 questions. You've pulled 3 problems out of them, and none of them have been my dog smells bad sometimes. So maybe that's important, right? Maybe that means that their dog smelling bad isn't one of their top 3 problems. So in that case, you learned that their dog sheds all over the place. So maybe you should think about pivoting your dog shampoo to something that makes dogs not shed anymore. Next one, N of 1 is not proof. So that means one person saying something shouldn't make you validate or invalidate anything. It shouldn't make you make any big decisions. If someone says something interesting and unexpected, you should go validate that and try to get 10 more people to come to the same conclusion independently. If you can't, that person was just crazy. If you can, then you've learned something really interesting. Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Basically, if I say, I want to go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym this year. It's my New Year's resolution. I'm going to go 3 times every week for the whole year. If you look back at the last 3 years, I've been to the gym once. Now, there's a chance that they'll change. There's a chance they'll go to the gym all the time. But what's much more likely is that they'll go to the gym once or twice that year, and then they'll just kind of stop going. So if you look back at what they have done, it's a great indication of what they will do. So another great example of this is asking someone about their diet. So let me bring my assistant up and let's see what this looks like. This is Cav. Cav, why don't you tell me about your diet?
I eat pretty healthy all the time.
Yeah? Any rules that you live by?
Yeah, I do kind of the paleo thing, mostly various kinds of low carb, honestly. I sort of play by whatever rules I feel like at the time, but I try to stay away from the bread and the pasta and stuff like that.
Great. So what we've learned is Cav eats really healthy, and he stays away from breads and pastas and a lot of meats and vegetables, right, Cav?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I eat a lot of meats and vegetables, yeah.
Great. So we've asked Cav about essentially his ideal self, about how he sees himself and his kind of future behavior, how he plans to eat. So let's try a different question. Cav, tell me about the last meal you had.
I had a sandwich a couple minutes ago. It was a meatball sandwich. It was pretty good. There was a lot of bread there, though, definitely.
Yeah. And what about the meal before that?
I was running kind of late to a meeting, so I had a Starbucks breakfast sandwich.
And what was in the breakfast sandwich?
Some egg. There was a muffin, definitely.
Muffin.
They had salads there, but I didn't really feel like having a salad for breakfast. I felt like that was a little weird.
Gotcha. Thanks, Kev. So what we discovered is, you can go now.
I'm like, wait, do you want to?
What we discovered is if you ask Cav what his diet is, he'll talk about his ideal self, how he sees himself. It also is kind of like how he sees that he'll eat in the future. But instead, if you ask about his past self, you end up finding out what he actually did. You find out of his actual self. And it turns out Cav doesn't actually eat particularly healthy. He has a lot of breads. I bet he had pasta last night, or Mexican food, or like all sorts of other stuff, right? So asking about their past self is asking about their actual self. And that's a great predictor of what they will do in the future. And so the last one is, and you just noticed this with the previous question, stories are better than statements. So Cav, how do you eat? He's like, I eat healthy. I don't eat bread. Great, those are statements. Tell me about the last time you did this. That encourages them to tell a story. And from that story, not only do you learn a lot more, but it gives you a lot more jumping off questions. Like, how am I gonna follow up, I eat healthy? What does that mean? And like, cool, I eat X, Y, and Z. That's not very interesting. That's pretty boring. So instead, you get them to tell a story. And then you can riff off that story, you can ask much more deeper questions, and they just talk a lot more. So that is the LIFFFT video series on the rules of customer interviews. Tune in next week for good techniques to get those stories.